The Denver Broncos have successfully wrapped up their off-season program, and now training camp awaits where Sean Payton, Bo Nix, they're ready to unleash here in 2025. We'll share our thoughts on the off-season program here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it is your team every day for all your Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. This is the place to be every single day, all year long. A special shout out to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. And if you're not yet an everydayer, become one. It's simple. Hit that subscribe or that follow button, and you're never going to miss out on what's going on with your favorite team. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, where you can check out my written work daily over there at milehighsports.com as I cover the team in person in Dove Valley. Practice recaps, game recaps, everything that you need to know year-round. That's the place to be, as well as Locked On Broncos. And here's what you're going to get on today's episode of the show. The Broncos on Thursday wrapped up their final mandatory minicamp practice, and now the offseason is got this lull, this 5-week stretch where there's no practice, no news, no nothing, but it's going to be training camp previews and a lot of stuff. We'll tell you why the Broncos are heading into this portion of the offseason on a strong and positive note after a very successful offseason program where we'll hear from Sean Payton. Plus, Payton went into great detail about what he believes is successful for the team's offseason program and why they feel like they can sell it to the players and how that's got them primed, I think, to make a little bit of a strong run here in 2025. And then we'll also go through how the Broncos escaped minicamp and OTAs without any major injuries, and they're expected to have everybody on the roster fully ready to go for the most part when training camp starts in the month of July here. Well, let's dive into, obviously, the final minicamp practice of the day. Now, obviously, after day 2, Sean Payton was asked by the media, do you plan on having a day 3? Because for the last handful of years, there's only been 2 days of mandatory minicamp. Sometimes going back to the Vic Fangio, Nathaniel Hackett era, that last day of mandatory minicamp, that third day usually gets cut off for like a field day, a player's day. I know the New Orleans Saints did that. Sean Payton told us after day 2 of practice initially that, hey, there's no more, sugar days around here anymore. It's a salt day. Well, Thursday's final practice was a salt day because the Broncos, they were on the field and they were putting in work here, kind of putting those finishing touches on the offseason install in which they've gone through dating back to when they came into the building to lift weights. Then you have team meetings, you have install periods. And since OTAs and now mandatory minicamp, it's been carrying over those installs into reps on field, offensively, defensively, special teams. And I'd say the Broncos, there's just a different vibe with this team right now in the offseason. And it's a good vibe. It's a good perception, but they're going to have to carry that over into training camp. They're going to have to carry that over into the regular season. You're going to have to see some of the results of that kind of come to fruition here, I think, for people to really believe that. But even the fans, just talking to fans, I walk back from the practice facility, and sometimes there's fans standing out there. They're excited about what's to come up ahead. And I hope you are too, because look, when this Broncos football team is good, everything in the world seems just right. So that's the focus here. So let's go into some news and notes here from the final day. Practice was more so just about an hour and 15 minutes long. There was one team period on the afternoon. The last couple of days, like day 1 and day 2 of minicamp, you saw 4 extensive team periods, some special teams drills implemented in between those periods. But that was not the case here for the final OTA practice. The Broncos, they came out, they were on the field, they did team stretch. They went to individual period where they worked offense and defensive drills, routes on air with the quarterbacks, DBs going through all their fundamental everyday drills that they normally do. And then there was one team period where the Broncos just kind of put some finishing touches on everything that they've installed here. And first off, you got to look with Bo Nix and that offense. And in that script, same exact thing that's been the standard going back to OTAs, Sean Payton is rotating guys in a receiver. He's rotating guys in a tight end on the offensive line and even at running back to try to maximize reps here for these guys as they look forward to maybe kind of carrying Sean's vision into full fruition. I think once you get to his 3rd season here, which the expectations with the culture, the turnaround, the shock that we've seen from Sean Payton's first year to now, this is a different Broncos football team. And really the big common denominator there, Sean Payton's one of them. I would say Bo Nix is the second. And one thing that Sean had mentioned about Bo is in the huddle, there's less hesitation, there's less pause, right? Because as a rookie last year, He's having this new playbook install, which, as we all know, Sean Payton's offense is very tricky. It's not easy by any means. You're getting a lot of information overload, but he handled that really well on top of having to battle Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson for that QB1 job last season. So Bo tackled that well. Bo looks entirely different. And I would say in my 3 days here watching practice, I see a more confident, more in-command quarterback where you could see the things that Sean is talking about because they'll be in a team period. They'll huddle. They'll have their first play. They'll run it. Bo is immediately getting these guys back to the huddle quickly. They're going through it, and he's calling it out. They're getting to the line of scrimmage. Bo is reading the field. He's reading the defense, the coverage, identifying the mic. And then sometimes he's even audibling saying, hey, kill. We're going to switch to this. Can't tell you exactly what they say. I'm not allowed to do that. But then you're seeing him just see everything develop, right? You look at that meme that pops up from the movie The Hangover where all the numbers and formulas are all over his head. That was kind of like, I think, where Bo Nix was at, and in a good way, because he's been more decisive with the football. I'd say he's leading guys in stride more on passes, but you're seeing a guy who's not afraid to stand in the pocket. He's patient there. That's something that Sean Payton highlighted following Thursday's final practice is just less hesitation, less pause from the guy who's going to be so important here for this Broncos franchise moving forward. That is Bo Nix at the quarterback position. Now, in that one team period that we saw from the Broncos here on Thursday, Bo had a tremendous play where he stayed in the pocket a little bit. Pressure was kind of bowling up around him. He did a great job of stepping underneath, rolling, and he had a sidearm throw, a little bit of a laser to Troy Franklin, caught him in stride. Troy Franklin did the rest, yards after the catch, downfield. Would it have been a touchdown in the game? Hard to say, but it's a massive play that regardless if it was in a game or not, it's a big play, successful play here for the Broncos offense. Bo, I think you're going to see that connection with these guys thriving a little bit more. And to touch note here on Troy Franklin, who made that catch here, Sean Payton talked about the impressive offseason that Troy had here and the fact that he's put on bulk. He's added 5 pounds of muscle in the offseason. He does look a little thicker. But the one thing that I'll say, too, about Troy is that his speed is still the same. It's still a problem for the defense. And he's that type of guy that doesn't necessarily have to run the deep ball to scare a defense. I think this year you're going to see Troy Franklin on different patterns, whether it be short to intermediate, whether it be the long pass. He's going to be a threat where defenses are going to have to account for where number 11 is. I think he's evolved a little bit. He looks much more comfortable and crisp in his route running here. And I think we're going to start to see some of the things here from this Broncos offense from Sean Payton that we saw from Bo Nix and Troy Franklin when they had that strong college connection when obviously those two played together at the University of Oregon. So I think Troy Franklin ended his offseason program on a high note. We'll talk about the wide receivers a little bit more in depth. Obviously, with Devaughn Vele missing all 3 days, we'll have an update for you later on here in the show on him. You got to see a lot more of Troy Franklin, Pat Bryant, these guys getting more reps exclusively with Bo Nix and also getting reps with the other two quarterbacks. And Sean Payton wants to maximize those looks here. And I thought he did a tremendous job on that. Another player who kind of had a standout play, I would say 2 days in a row, Caleb Lohner on day 2 of minicamp looked good. Day 3, he had arguably the most impressive catch of the afternoon where he kind of dove for a pass and hauled it in. It was a tough angle, but his ball focus was there. And this was something that I wanted to see because last week, one thing I saw with Caleb Lohner, same exact route, same exact design, he had a drop on a wide open play. This time he hauls in what would have been a very, very difficult catch for most people, even some receivers. Great body control, hauls it in, secures it. That's what I love to see from Caleb Lohner. He's continuing to develop here for Sean Payton inside of this Broncos offense. So overall, a short, sweet practice here on the afternoon. Now the Broncos, they're off. They're about 5.5, maybe 6 weeks off before the start of training camp here. And the message for Sean Payton is simple, that, hey, we believe in the offseason program that we kind of put together. You look at the Broncos' attendance, I'd say overall during the lifting portion, not just the on-field football stuff, voluntary workouts, attendance was great for the most part, near perfect, and obviously mandatory minicamp, perfect attendance minus obviously Devaughn Vele with his undisclosed absence, which we'll dive into later. That is a sign of a team that is understanding the message here. And speaking of understanding that message, Sean Payton shared with us, I had a chance to ask him how the coaching staff evaluates these offseason practices where there are no pads, because we know that's the crucial factor when evaluating talent. Sean gave me a great, insightful answer. We'll share that and much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at Skylight Calendar. So say goodbye, Broncos Country, to sticky notes, scribbled plans on the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites. Those can be overwhelming. The Skylight Calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without the stress. This sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars, whether it be Google, Apple, Outlook, and more, making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders all in one easy-to-see place. And the thing I like about the Skylight Calendar that I love my Skylight Calendar because not only does it connect with all of my calendars that I have, work, personal, email, but it also assigns my fiance. It connects hers as well. And right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/NFL. Go to skylightcal.com/NFL for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That's SKYLIGHTCAL.com/NFL. Sean Payton had a very honest evaluation of the team's offseason program where he believes, and you look at the players, that buy-in is there. And that's how the Broncos are looking to take a big step forward here in 2025 and go further than just winning 10 games, go further than just a wild card appearance. They want to host a playoff game, and Sean Payton believes that inside that locker room, this team has received the message loud and clear. They know what the standard is. We'll break it all down here on today's episode of the show here. And look, Broncos Country, I think one of the hardest things about the offseason program, when you talk about these OTAs, rookie minicamp, mandatory minicamp practices, it's great to see the players on the field, right? It's great to see the offense going up against the defense in 7-on-7 in team drills. It's great to see the special teams drills start to formulate the foundational aspects of your install there. But the one thing about this game that I love so much is the beauty of the physical contact, right? That's why I think if any of you who are watching or listening to the show, if you've played, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's nothing better than that certain smell in the air when it's around football time, right? The grass is cut, the sun's out, it's a little bit bright. Obviously, as you've seen me, I've been cooked and roasted by the sun here, but also the sound of shoulder pads popping. That's what we all love. And that's coming up obviously in July, but during these practices that you get in the offseason program, you can't have contact. Obviously, the new CBA limits a lot of the time that players spend on field. And over time, it's evolved where there were physical practices where there were one-on-ones. You get used to see padded practices during some of the offseason program stuff. It's now transitioned to helmets and just jerseys and shorts. And obviously, there's an acclimation period here. But one thing that Sean Payton touched on about where this team is at, when you look at the data history, and he obviously, had a couple of shots at the NFLPA survey that gets put out there. He called it a BS survey. But the one thing I would say where Sean is absolutely right is in today's NFL with the CBA, coaches and players, they're limited on the things that they can do. But how do you build callousness in a sense so that guys are ready for the regular season? And so much of it is you go back to the Nathaniel Hackett era. One thing we saw, tons of injuries, tons of season-ending injuries, tons of weeks missed by guys due to injuries. And a lot of that was because there was no callousness built up because these guys didn't play in the preseason. I understand the risk and reward as well as a former coach. And you want to make sure, are we putting our guys in a position where is there going to be any benefit to them being on the field? Well, for Sean Payton, and I think just for the standard of the game, you have to be able to play in some of those preseason games to build this callousness. But really, I'd say the callousness that you need, I think, to be a physical, strong, and successful football team. Yes, you're going to have to play some snaps in the preseason, but I think it starts in training camp. And one thing we know is Sean's training camp practices, I've talked to a handful of players about it. They say it's the hardest training camp that they've ever been in their entire lives. But on the flip side of that, they also said you see the reward. There's some veteran guys that have been on this team for quite some time that were a little opposed to it at first when Sean came in. But then you start to see the results. They started saying okay, hey, we understand this. We have our goals, and this is the way that we're going to get there. To avoid some of those major injuries, that callousness kind of has to be built a little bit in practice, not to an extent where you're destroying your teammates. You never want to have that dynamic, but you have to have that physicality and that approach there. And that's something that Sean Payton has talked about here. Now, I would say the biggest thing that he's promoted and has really, I'd say there's been buy-in from the players, the offseason program where guys aren't leaving Denver after the season ends. They're staying in Denver. They're taking a vacation for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, but they're staying in Denver, and then they're coming and they're training at the team facility. They're lifting. They're getting into the team cafeteria where they all have their own personalized nutritionists, and they have plans there to help them meet their goals. And here's what Sean had to say about the team's offseason program, which I agree with what he said.
We're probably the only team that stays in phase 1 for 5 weeks. So I would say the most important thing we do is lift, change our bodies, run, condition. We'll have plenty of time for the football. And there's a reason we spent 5 weeks and we don't even go near. I don't want them pulling into the parking lot in April thinking they're coming to football practice. I want them coming here knowing that they're going to get a good workout in, good lift in. So that would be the most important.
And look, it's easy. As a former player, I always loved hey, it's, football workouts are here, but it's all right, when are we going to go on the field? When are we going to do 7-on-7? When are we going to run routes and catch passes from the quarterbacks? Or when are we going to cover wide receivers, do DB drills? You can't get there. And I think that's just a lot of younger guys, they do some specialized trainings. But the one thing that Sean emphasizes is that when we get here in April before the draft, we want to build our bodies up for the season, right? And some of these players will come into the offseason program with weight-specific goals. Do they want to add on some more muscle but lean out and still maintain their athleticism and explosiveness? Well, they have a whole plan built into that with their strength and conditioning staff, and obviously guys dealing with injuries, coming back from that. There's an extensive plan there with Bo Lowry. But that was the selling point. It was so easy with the near-perfect attendance that we've seen from the Broncos this offseason program and that 86% roster retention rate. This is the formula where if these guys do stay healthy, I have a hard time seeing the Broncos take a step back. I have them taking a massive step forward, which, hey, last year was very impressive, them getting 10 wins. This can be a team that could be better than 10-plus wins in 2025 if everything plays out. But I think that buy-in is the most important thing. This level of buy-in in the locker room behind the scenes for an offseason program was never at the rate in which it was now in prior years. I'm talking 2022, 2021, 2020, 2019, 2018, the revolving door of coaches. That obviously has an impact. But now you have the same staff. You have continuity for 3 straight seasons. There's been some changes here and there, but nothing that's impacted the overall makeup and DNA of this roster in a major way. That is the selling point. That's something that players, some guys that I have spoken to, are the most excited about here. Now, there's another thing as well. I asked Sean Payton, and this is, I think, a very important thing because when we're sitting there as media, we're watching practice, fans are waiting for updates on everything. Who's standing out? What plays are being made? I'm always a big believer. The pads never lie, right? You can see a guy in a helmet and jersey look great, but when the pads come on, this guy might not look great in training camp. In order to evaluate guys properly, I asked Sean Payton how he and his coaches evaluate guys during this period because the evaluation is skewed when you don't have on the pads.
It's difficult.
What can you learn from this period?
What's real important is assignment, alignment. That can keep a player from playing. We always talk about three ways you're being evaluated. Does the player know what to do? Is he trying to do what's being coached? And then lastly, how well does he do it? So assignment, alignment, technique, those things.
And that's an important element of the game. And look, I know it sounds cliche, but those are the things, those are the little details that make up the difference between you missing out on making a 53-man roster or maybe even ending up out of the league. That is a very, very prominent thing with a lot of players. And you're going to see that certainly over the next few months as teams go and trim their rosters from 90 to 53. But I agree. Alignment, assignment, technique, right? Is this guy lined up? Is he doing the things the right way? I think one of the things that Sean said that was the most important there is this guy doing what we coach him to do? Are they doing it the right way? Is there a process or are they trying to do things on their own? Now, I will say that this is a coaching staff that they want things done a certain way in terms of how they run routes against certain coverages, right? But in between that, there is some flexibility. There is some collaboration here where if you're getting a certain look or you feel like you have a benefit, like a speed trait or a size trait or physicality trait that's going to allow you to maybe cheat over a little bit, the coaches are very good at listening to players when they bring this feedback to them. But ultimately, it's can they play within the scheme and can they excel in what we're asking them to do? And do they do their job, right? And part of doing your job means being selfless. If you're out there doing your own thing, that's going to hurt the rest of the football team. And that's something that has kind of gone away. Like that has kind of eroded itself away from this Broncos team since Sean has come on. I would say there was a little bit of that in 2023, but last year in 2024, so far early on here, you haven't seen that. So we're going to continue to evaluate these guys under the microscope. Training camp, when the pads come on, is going to be the most important evaluation as we look at some of these guys that stood out initially during the offseason program without the pads. So we're going to continue to monitor that, and that'll lead us into some of our training camp previews. That'll lead you up to all the action in July, Broncos country. But we're not done yet on today's episode of the show. Luckily for the Broncos, they leave for training camp. They leave this 5-week period fully healthy for the most part, and everyone expected back, including an update here on Broncos wide receiver Devaughn Vele. Will he be ready for the start of camp? We'll share our thoughts on that and much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Broncos Country, today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. And as you know, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, the NBA Finals, they are here, and they are in full swing. And every game delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get on the action than right now, because FanDuel, they make it easy to stay in the game, especially for the NBA Finals before tip-off and live as the game is ongoing, with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and to win big. And right now, the Indiana Pacers, they have a 2-1 lead against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Despite that, and despite Game 4 coming up on Friday, where they are 6-point home underdogs despite the 2-1 lead in the series. What's going on with that? Because if you're new to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. The Denver Broncos are heading out of minicamp relatively healthy, which is a good sign for them as they look to compete and move the needle here in 2025. We'll continue our conversation here, give you some injury updates on guys like Devaughn Vele, PJ Locke, and obviously Dre Greenlaw as the Broncos now gear up for training camp and what's to come ahead. I think there are a lot of things here that we're going to focus on, but let's obviously play the hits here. When you talk about Devaughn Vele, he's been the subject of conversation throughout these first 3 mandatory minicamp practices because he was having such a strong offseason, strong OTAs. He was a consistent standout. He was making plays almost every day in the team period from the practices that I attended. And then we come out this past week to mandatory minicamp. We don't see him day one. We're like, okay, maybe there's a personal thing that came up. Maybe he'll be back on day 2, because after day 1, Sean said, hey, there's no concern there with him. We're like, all right, maybe he'll be back. He kind of alluded that something had come up. There was an event or something. But we'll see. All right, so day 2 rolls around, still no Devaughn Vele. So we didn't really prod or pry here for Sean Payton to get an update, but Sean did share a little bit of an update after the final day of minicamp. He had a little bit of a feisty response afterwards after he gave the initial update on wide receiver Devaughn Vele. Here's what he had to say about the Broncos' second-year wide receiver.
He's going to be full go, start of training camp. Everything's good.
Which is good. I mean, obviously, as long as he's there for the start of training camp and there's nothing lingering, that's good. And obviously, I think we don't know for sure what the issue was with Devaughn Vele. It could have been an undisclosed injury. It could have been a personal matter in his own life. That's not our place here to pick and prod and decide. I think for all of us, we just hope that Devaughn's okay in whatever facet of which, his absence has impacted him, whether it be an injury, whether it be a personal event. We just hope he's okay. And the fact that he's going to be ready for the start of training camp, that's all we need to know. That's as far as it should go right there. So a good update here for Broncos Country, because I know a lot of you were interested. I've received a lot of emails. I've received a lot of tweets asking about Vele. And the truth, honest to God's truth, we have no idea what was going on. But it's not our place to pick and prod. He's going to be there. And maybe if there is something he's willing or wanting to share, we'll find out. But he did mention maybe, the Broncos are expected to have their full roster all intact, healthy, ready to go when training camp starts. He said maybe minus the exception. He brought up A.T. Perry's name, which was a little bit of a surprise because A.T., we hadn't seen him even in OTAs at this point, and we were really wondering, okay, hey, what's going on with A.T. Perry here? It seems like there was an injury. We don't know what it is, but he said that A.T. Perry could be maybe 1 week into training camp where we could expect to see him. That's where maybe the timeline is for him. But, I mean, that's good news here for Alex Singleton. It's good news for Dre Greenlaw, P.J. Locke, other guys, Mitchell Fraboni. This is where I think the Broncos have the advantage going into training camp is, okay, now you went through your offseason lifting program. You've gotten stronger. You've gotten faster. You got the conditioning down pat. And obviously there's some responsibility on the players as they go through this 5.5, 6 week break here to maintain obviously some of the progress they've made. Not to sit and eat potato chips on the couch all day like I do sometimes, but go out there and obviously, stay healthy. Don't do anything crazy, but also unwind a little bit because we know training camp, it's already hot. You can already see it. I'm sunburnt to a crisp, and that's going to be a standard here, but it's going to be hot. You want to make sure that you're coming into training camp on track, in your weight goals where you're at. You want to come in healthy. You don't want to come in out of shape, because that's always a no-no. That 5.5, 6 week period can be a little bit of a blessing and a curse. Curse more so if you come into it overweight, as some guys have historically in the NFL. You read about it every year, but I don't think that's an issue here for the Denver Broncos. But for Vele to be back, that's great. I will say this for PJ Locke, an update on him. I know he did have some sort of offseason surgery. Not sure what it is. I'm not going to speculate on that. We have seen him during mandatory minicamp. He's participated in team stretch every single day. Tuesday's practice, Wednesday's practice, and he also participated in team stretch on Thursday. But the difference is, after team stretch, those first couple of days of practice, PJ will go to the side field. He would do conditioning and rehab work with Bo Lowry and his training staff. But what we saw, a little bit of a change up here on Thursday's final practice, PJ was a full participant in the sense of participating in individual drills, working with the DBs, the corners, and the safeties, but he didn't participate in the team period. So I imagine he's going to be on track, fully ready to go for the start of training camp. Alex Singleton, team stretch, individual period here once again, working with those linebackers, but no team period for him during minicamp. He's expected to go and get his first looks in team when obviously training camp rolls around. So good news for the Broncos defensive captain there. And then, hey, Dre Greenlaw, the Broncos inside linebacker, key offseason addition there as well. Throughout mandatory minicamp, we've seen him working on the side field. He has participated in team stretch, and now he's gradually working his way back. I think primarily he's just been conditioning. He is fully set to go for the start of training camp, which we're excited about, because the Broncos, they like what he can do. He adds some juice to the inside linebacker position, so they're in a very good spot right now. Mitchell Fraboni had offseason back surgery. He's been participating more. He was obviously working with the special teams guys here today, which was a great sign to see. The team had released Zach Triner, a veteran long snapper that was on the roster in the meantime, while Fraboni had recovered from his back surgery. So he should be ready to rock and roll here for the start of training camp as well. But for Denver going into the offseason fully healthy, that's a great sign, and it's about maintaining that. So I'm very excited for obviously things to kind of play out here. And look, Broncos Country, there's no practice until really late July when training camp starts, but there's a lot that we're going to have you covered with here every single day on Locked On Broncos. Sayre and I, we're soon going to be sitting down and recording our training camp position previews, where we highlight the overview of that position room. We'll look at the key position battles at that specific position and who's got the advantage and disadvantage based on what we've seen in the offseason program. That stuff will lead you right into the start of training camp. So Locked On Broncos is the place to be here, especially leading up to the start of the regular season. But we couldn't do it without you, Broncos Country. We appreciate you so much. Tomorrow's episode of the show, for all you everydayers out there, Sayre Bedinger, myself, we're going to sit down and we're going to break down our stock up, stock down, and players that we want to see a little bit more of when training camp starts in July. You're going to get that on tomorrow's episode. Locked On Broncos. We'll see you then.